Welcome back to The Edge. A quick reminder, VSiN Plus subs free until the major sport returns. Check it out, vsin.com/subscribe. You don't just get the VSiN Plus sub, of course. With that, you get Points Spread Weekly out every single Wednesday, 10 a.m. Pacific time, straight to your inbox for download. You get access to live shows and replays as well, which you can watch, and much, much more. So check it out, vsin.com/subscribe. That is vsin.com/subscribe. It is The Edge here on VSiN, the sports betting network. Let's do it. It's nothing but analytics. God, that is such a sick spin move. Like, that guy has nothing. Absolutely nothing. The fluidity, the footwork, it's absolutely gorgeous. All right, the NBA. So we're getting a little bit closer, obviously, to Orlando every single day. I can't wait. The NBA will start to make their way down there in a few weeks, and then, of course, games start at the end of the month. So we're going through these. We're starting team by team, right? We're starting team by team, giving you statistical breakdowns of each. We've already gone through 2 teams at this point already. So we've got another, 20 teams left to go. So our third team on the board in terms of nothing but analytics, and a team that I think is actually insanely intriguing, mainly because of what the ceiling could potentially be for this team, is the Los Angeles Clippers. Now, my personal team that I rate the highest, I should say, in the National Basketball Association at this point. I think the Clippers are the highest power-rated team, according to my ratings at this point. So I should get out of the way that, yes, there is, according to my numbers, like an advantage of playing a small number because they should be on top of the futures board, but I don't want to invest in such a small price, especially with the unknown of the coronavirus and the bubble in Orlando. So let's take a look at the Clippers from multiple perspectives. So we have the numbers here for their offensive strengths, right? We'll run through these really quickly, right? They have the third best offensive rating in the NBA, 112.9 points per 100 possessions. Their offensive rebounding is actually the 5th best in the NBA. Their offensive rebounding rate, getting in 27.3% of their misses, and their half-court efficiency, top 10, they rank 8th, averaging 97.9 points every 100 possessions within the half-court. And I'll talk to their weaknesses, too, because the rim shooting's not that great, right? They rank 17th in terms of rim shooting percentage, 62.7% within 4 feet. Corner three-point shooting struggles as well. And we have talked about this when we break down these teams from a statistical standpoint. Usually, if you're struggling at the rim, your corner three-point percentage somewhat correlates because corner threes are usually open when you're driving to the rim. Right. Now, I think a little bit is explained in terms of the rim shooting by who their superstars are, mainly a Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard takes a majority of his shots from the mid-range. Kawhi Leonard likes to live in the mid-range. You know, and superstars like Kawhi Leonard, they push back against the adage that the mid-range shot is dying because if you have a really good NBA player like Kawhi, like Kevin Durant, who actually shoot a lot of mid-range jump shots, you know, it pushes back against that narrative. The narrative of the mid-range jump shot is that teams as a whole shouldn't be taking them, but you can have specific players like your superstars do it. Get this out of the way. So here's my one question with a team like the Los Angeles Clippers up to this point. Because you can see the strengths and the weaknesses there's not a lot, right? There's not a lot of strengths. There's not a lot of weaknesses. But that's because I think this team is kind of an unknown up to this point. I'll give you this example for it. Kawhi Leonard has played in just 51 of Los Angeles' 64 games. Paul George has played in only 42 of Los Angeles' 64 games. The two have been on the floor together, according to Cleaning the Glass, for just 1,562 possessions. To give you an idea of how few that is, Anthony Davis and LeBron James have been on the floor together for 2,785 possessions. So think about that, almost doubling up the fact that, you know, they've been on the floor together more, AD and LeBron, than Paul George and Kawhi Leonard have. So we know that we have this really small sample size of what the Los Angeles Clippers are when they're at full strength, and that plays out in some of these numbers. But I'll throw in one more question, one more wrench into this is, on top of that, they added Marcus Morris, if you remember, right before the trade deadline, right? So they add Marcus Morris, which figures to be a massive part of their rotation. And the reason why, of course, this is such a big deal is the numbers with Marcus Morris, Kawhi Leonard, and Paul George over a small sample size are absolutely dynamic. When those three have been in the lineup together on the floor, the Clippers have a plus 15.7 net rating. That lineup ranks in the 96th percentile among lineups in offensive and defensive efficiency. And the last part of this whole piece of the puzzle is not only have Kawhi Leonard and Paul George not played together, not only are you adding in a guy like Marcus Morris who's new to the equation, who can, you know, play a small ball 5 and adds a different dynamic to his game defensively and offensively. The last part of this whole issue with the Clippers of, you know, what does this statistical profile tell you about them? What do we know about the Clippers? It's the fact that they have played this season, again, 64 games. They have played just 11 games this year in which they have had their entire roster fully healthy. Think about that. Just 11 games out of the 64 they have played fully healthy. How can we really take from these numbers what this team is? And we'll give you those 11 games, right? What are their record in those 11 games? They're 10-1 straight up, with an 8-3 ATS record in those 11 games, right? The one loss being their last game against the Los Angeles Lakers that came right before the hiatus, which they lost by, I believe it was 10 points. I think it was 113 to 103, somewhere in that range. But they had been ripping off wins left and right when they were fully healthy. And so you look at this all over and you think, okay, well, what is this team? And you can get glimpses, I think, of what this team really is. Look at it from this perspective. Leonard, George, Morris on the floor. I gave you where they ranked offensively, defensively, right? 117.7 points per 100 possessions on offense, 102.6 points per 100 possessions in the half court. Their offensive rebounding rate is 30.5%. All of those numbers I just listed off, if we could throw up the strengths one more time, I'm sorry, I know you guys just switched that over, but if you throw up their offensive strengths one more time, those are the 3 offensive strength categories that we listed and showed for you here. All those numbers are higher than those figures right there. So clearly there is a sense that maybe, and again, it's a short sample size, so we don't know this, but maybe how good this Clippers team is better than what we've seen, and their ceiling is actually pretty high, especially with this 3-man lineup on the floor together. All their figures higher than their listed offensive strengths at this point. So, and this team, I think the sky is the limit for them offensively. And also think about it from this perspective. Paul George, Landry Shamet, Patrick Beverley, Kawhi Leonard all shoot over 36.6% while shooting more than 4.1 three-point attempts per game. So offensively, this team is pretty good. And I think they have a long way to figure out what exactly they are from an offensive standpoint. And we'll figure that out maybe in the 8 games in the playoff series leading up to the final few rounds in the postseason. And this is all offensively. Let's take a look at this team from a defensive standpoint. And again, keeping in mind that we've only had a fully healthy Clippers team for 11 games, and they still rank well within the top 10 in opponent field goal percentage within 4 feet. That's rim shooting. Mid-range shooting, they rank 2nd in the NBA defensively. 3-point shooting, they rank 7th in the NBA defensively. Non-corner 3-point shooting, 34.4. Corner 3-point shooting, they rank 7th in terms of 37% what they give up to opponents. And in the half court, they give up just 92.2 points per 100 possessions, which is the 5th best mark in the NBA. So you have all of these strengths for the Los Angeles Clippers, right? All well within the top 10. And they're a team that, again, has only played 11 games together. And on top of that, they added Marcus Morris to the lineup, who's a dynamic defender who's already improved them from a defensive efficiency standpoint. The one weakness that they have, and you can see it right there, the fast break efficiency, underneath 15th. They're 17th in the NBA, giving up 124.3 points per 100 possessions. But it's not even a glaring enough weakness, right? They're going to sit back and think maybe it is something that you can exploit, right? Because this team's actually not terrible in the fast break. But again, I think I should note too this, right? I'm noting how good they can be. There's also the potential that it's a small sample size of Morris on the floor, and maybe they're not that good. Like, you're obviously willing to admit that, but what the eye test shows you and what some of the numbers have shown you with this team that you haven't seen fully healthy yet is that I think they are the best team in the NBA when you look at them from that statistical standpoint. And here's the last part on this. When it comes to matching up with a team like the Los Angeles Lakers, maybe a team like the Milwaukee Bucks. But to me, the key difference, because it's always been asked, right, which team is better between the 2 Los Angeles teams? Who is the best team in the Western Conference? And to me, the difference is when you pull AD off the floor, when you pull LeBron off the floor, when you pull Kawhi off the floor, when you pull Paul George off the floor, what is the difference? What's going to happen? The Lakers have a slightly negative net rating when both of those guys are off the floor. The Los Angeles Clippers have a positive net rating when both Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are off the floor. Their roster is deeper. Their bench is deeper. We've talked about the struggles of 3-point shooting for the Los Angeles Lakers outside of 2 guys who take more than 2 3-point attempts but shoot over 36%. And I just listed off all the guys that have that ability on the Clippers team offensively. And so you look at it just from this perspective, and it just, my ratings, the numbers that I'm listing off to you right now, and everything in between, that is why I think the Los Angeles Clippers are the best team in the Western Conference. And that a bad matchup for a team, I think, is going to be surprising. And I think it'll be really interesting to see. I think a team they don't want to see, and a team that they are winless against, by the way. And I think they would play them in a 7-game series. They would go to 7 games. They'd more than likely win because they have better talent overall and depth. But it'd be a sneaky bad matchup for them, is a team like the Houston Rockets. A team like the Houston Rockets, who have gone with this small ball lineup, who can really stretch you out, really get up and down the floor, obviously can switch almost everything on defense, and then offensively you have 5 guys at one point who can all take 3-point shots. It's obviously something hard to deal with, and the Clippers have shown in their 2 losses to the Houston Rockets that they have trouble dealing with the Rockets. So maybe that is something to watch here, and I think that's why the Clippers slightly will be playing a little bit more during these 8 games. One, because they haven't played that many games together, as we mentioned. But the other is, I think they want to avoid falling into that 3 seed and falling into a first-round matchup with the Houston Rockets. I think they want Denver to take that matchup for them so they can deal with like the team like the Dallas Mavericks, who they can take advantage of. With the Dallas Mavericks, who I think rank right now second in terms of offensive efficiency, but middle of the pack to 18th in terms of defensive efficiency, and something they can exploit there, right? A youngish team that they match up much better with than a team like the Houston Rockets. So keep that in mind as we get to these 8 games, these seeding games as they call them, and keep that in mind when we start to see them play, because I think a team like the Clippers actually might take a couple of these games in the 8 seeding games a little bit more seriously than their counterparts. And actually, could we throw that up, guys, so the people can watch this? So you see the standings right there, 44-20, just ahead of the Denver Nuggets, who are sitting at 43-22. They're a game and a half up right now, according to the standings, on the Denver Nuggets. And if they were to fall, obviously that puts you in that 3-6 matchup. We also don't know what Houston's going to do in terms of the seeding, but I just think generally the Clippers really want to hold on to that second seed. It's not about the seeding overall. It's just about setting up a matchup, and it's not a matchup they want in terms of the Houston Rockets. So there you go. Nothing but analytics. Los Angeles Clippers, not a lot of cracks in that armor. Oh, and by the way, so I've mentioned too, right? Like what's a team, bad matchups, good matchups. Houston Rockets could be one of them. And obviously it's hard to look past a team like the Milwaukee Bucks. But Kawhi Leonard has that head-to-head matchup. He's played them. Obviously, we know what happened in the Eastern Conference Finals a year ago. If you missed out on any part of the program, check out vsin.com/bestbets. Everything is up there. Tom Byrne, awesome job. You can check out that interview tomorrow. Deep dive into the Colonial, of course, with Wes Reynolds. We're going to have much more to talk about, too, now that we have a proposal from Major League Baseball. Maybe we'll have news on that front. But check out vsin.com, too, because plus subs are free until a major sport returns. So until then, we will see you tomorrow. Follow us up on Twitter at MeJVT and at VSiN Live. We'll see you.